It's okay. You're gonna be okay, my friend.
The rain hammered down like 1,000 tiny fists on the windshield of Tom's battered pickup, turning the narrow country lane into a slick ribbon of mud and regret. He'd been driving these back roads for hours, not really going anywhere, just chasing the kind of silence that only comes when the world's drowned out. That's when he saw it. A shadow lunging from the underbrush, straight into his headlights. Not an animal scattering in fear, but one planting itself dead center. Paws splayed against the grill like it was holding the truck accountable. Golden fur matted and streaked with crimson, eyes locked on Tom's through the glass, with a plea that cut deeper than any storm. This wasn't a stray begging for scraps. This was desperation carved into flesh, legged soul screaming without a sound, "Follow me, or she'll be gone." Tom slammed on the brakes, heart kicking up gravel in his chest. He wasn't the type to play hero. Hadn't been since the accident that stole his wife 2 years back, leaving him with a hollowed-out life and a dog-eared photo in the glove box he couldn't bring himself to toss. But those eyes. They weren't asking for pity. They were demanding action, as if the dog knew Tom's own grief. Knew the weight of watching someone slip away when you were too damn late to grab hold. Muttering a curse under his breath, Tom killed the engine and stepped out into the downpour, the cold seeping through his jacket like an old accusation. A lean shepherd mix, ribs sharp under rain, slicked skin, didn't flinch. Instead it wheeled around, glancing back once, twice, before bolting into the tree line. Tom hesitated, water blurring his vision, but something primal tugged at him. What if this was the pull he'd been waiting for? What if ignoring it meant carrying one more ghost? He grabbed a flashlight from the cab, its beam slicing through the gloom like a hesitant promise. After the dog. Branches clawed at his arms, roots snagged his boots, and the thunder rolled in like laughter from the gods, mocking his fool's errand. Dog moved with purpose, a ghost in the mist, pausing every few yards to ensure Tom was still there. Panting, slipping, but committed now. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the forest closing in tighter, until the ground dipped sharply into a ravine. There, at the bottom, tangled in the wreckage of a collapsed lean-to, lay the reason for it all. The female dog, smaller, wire-haired, belly swollen with the unmistakable curve of impending life, whimpered faintly, one hind leg pinned under a splintered beam, pooling dark and final in the mud. Her breaths came in shallow rasps, eyes half-lidded, as if she'd already bartered her fight for a quiet surrender. Tom's stomach twisted, a knot of recognition tightening. He'd seen that look before, the hospital room with flickering fluorescence and beeping monitors that lied about hope. He slid down the embankment on his haunches, knees sinking into the muck beside her. Up close, the damage was brutal. The beam had crushed her leg at an angle that screamed infection. Shock setting in with every shuddering inhale. The male dog, Rusty, Tom would later name him, circled them both, nose nudging her flank, turning to Tom with that same unyielding stare. It wasn't aggression, it was alliance, a silent contract forged in fur and fear. Rusty's paw pressed against Tom's thigh, not gently, but with the insistence of a partner in crime. "Save her, you're the one who can." His hands trembled as he assessed the beam. Heavy oak, warped by rot but unyielding. No tools, no leverage, just a man and his ghosts against the dying light. What happened next blurred into a frenzy of adrenaline and ache. Tom wedged his shoulder under the wood, muscles screaming as he heaved. The dog below him letting out a keen that pierced the storm like a blade. Inch by agonizing inch the beam lifted, and Rusty darted in, teeth gentle on her scruff. Her free. She collapsed against the wet earth, leg mangled but body intact, for now. Tom stripped off his jacket, fashioning a crude tourniquet from his belt and a torn sleeve, binding the wound tight enough to stem the bleed. Rain mixed with sweat on his face. Notice. All he saw was her chest rising, falling, rising again. Rusty licked her muzzle, then Tom's hand, as if sealing the pact. Couldn't stay here, the cold would finish what the beam started. With a grunt, Tom scooped her up. Lighter than he expected, fragile as a half-remembered dream, and cradled her against his chest. Rusty flanked him, herding him back up the slope toward the truck. Step a negotiation with gravity and grief. The drive back was a white-knuckled gamble. Tom's farm sat miles off the grid, a weathered sprawl of barn and solitude he'd inherited from his father, the kind of place that swallowed secrets whole. No vet within striking distance in this weather. The nearest town was a flooded memory. He laid her on a bed of old blankets in the barn's tack room, air thick with hay and desperation. Rusty refused to leave her side, curling protectively around her swollen form, buried in her fur as if willing strength through sheer will. Tom rummaged through his supplies. Antibiotics from a long ago horse colic, killer's Pifford from his own cabinet after sleepless nights. He cleaned the wound as best he could, stitching it with fishing line and a prayer, his hands steady now, guided by some forgotten instinct. But as the night deepened, her fever spiked, body convulsing in waves that mirrored the thunder outside. Rusty paced, whining low, his eyes flicking to Tom. Do more. Fix this. The weight of that trust settled on Tom's shoulders like a yoke, forcing him to confront the truth he'd buried. Losing her would echo the losses that had hollowed him out. Dawn crept in grudgingly, the barn rafters in bruised purples. Tom hadn't slept, slumped in a chair with a thermos of black coffee gone cold. Rusty's head rested on his knee, vigil that spoke volumes about loyalty's quiet ferocity. And then, a shift, a soft, insistent panting from the blankets. She was in labor, not the triumphant kind from storybooks, but a battle won on borrowed time, her body taxed beyond reason. Tom knelt beside her, murmuring nonsense words he'd once whispered to his wife in labor, back when their world was whole. Rusty hovered, licking her ears, presence a steady anchor in the chaos. The first pup arrived slick and squirming, a tiny female with fur like burnished copper, cleared her airways with trembling fingers, and she let out a mewl that cracked something deep in him. One by one, they came, 3 more. A miracle rested from the brink, their cries weaving a fragile symphony against the receding storm. But the last one. Oh, one hung in the balance like a held breath. It emerged still, a limp bundle that refused to stir. The mother's eyes widened in animal terror, lapping weakly at the inert form. Rusty froze, a low rumble building in his throat, not at Tom but at fate itself. Time slowed, barn air thickening with unspoken dread. Tom scooped the pup into his palms, rubbing gently, willing warmth into its chilled body. Memories flooded him unbidden. Wife's hand in his during those final pushes, the joy that turned to ash when their daughter arrived too soon, too silent. He'd failed them then, so the nightmares whispered. Not this time. He breathed into the pup's muzzle, soft and rhythmic, his own tears salting the fur. And then, a twitch, a gasp, the tiniest spark of life igniting. The pup's chest heaved, eyes blinking open to reveal irises flecked with gold, just like the ones in that faded photo. A mark on its paw, a faint white crescent, mirroring the tattoo his wife had inked on her wrist as a nod to their shared wanderlust. Coincidence? Or the universe's sly wink threading loss into redemption? As the sun breached the horizon, bathing the litter in golden light, Tom sat back on his heels, exhaustion mingling with a euphoria he hadn't tasted in years. The mother nursed her brood, strength returning in quiet surges, while Rusty inspected each pup with the solemnity of a sentinel, his tail thumping once, a victory lap understated. Tom reached out, scratching behind Rusty's ears. The first time the dog leaned into it, not as supplicant, but as equal. In that moment, transformed from a repository of solitude to a cradle of second beginnings. Tom had come home to ghosts. Now, he had allies in the fight against them. But stories like this don't end with the dawn. They ripple outward, reshaping the currents of lives long adrift. Over the weeks that followed, Tom threw himself into their care with a fervor that surprised even him. He reinforced the barn into a proper whelping den, sourcing puppy formula from a neighbor who'd eyed him warily since the accident. Vet visits became routine, the injured mother's leg mending under casts and checkups, steadying into a purposeful lope. The pups grew like weeds in spring, tumbling over each other in sun-dappled yards, their yips a soundtrack to Tom's rediscovered rhythm. That last one, the fighter with the crescent paw, he named Luna, a nod to the moon that had watched over their impossible night. She shadowed him everywhere, a pint-sized mirror to his moods, flecked gaze pulling confessions from him during long evenings on the porch. Rusty, though. He was the architect of it all, the dog who'd chosen Tom not out of need, but out of an unerring sense of who could be saved as much as who could save. Their bond deepened in the quiet rituals, morning runs along the fence line, where Rusty's joy unbound reminded Tom of laughter's sharp edges, evenings by the fire, where the dog's head in his lap coaxed stories of the wife who'd loved fiercely, her absence less a void and more a shape to honor. Through it all, Tom began to unravel the psychology of loyalty, not the saccharine kind peddled in greeting cards, but the raw evolutionary tether that binds souls across species. Studies whisper of it how dogs read our micro-expressions better than mirrors, sensing heart rates in moments of stress, leasing oxytocin floods that mirror human bonds. But Rusty embodied it, a living testament that grief isn't a solo dirge, it's a call answered by the unexpected. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves cartwheeled across the fields, loaded the family into the truck for their first real outing. A county fair buzzing with lights and clamor. The pups, now leggy adolescents, romped in a penned area under Rusty's watchful eye, while the mother, fully healed, rechristened Sage for her quiet wisdom, lounged at Tom's feet. Durs hawked pies and trinkets, but Tom's gaze snagged on a booth draped in faded banners, Lost Pets Reunited. An older woman manned it, her face etched with the lines of too many searches.